In the 19th century, a golden age of Egyptology dawned, as explorers and scholars descended upon the Nile Valley, unearthing the secrets of a lost world. At vast temple complexes like Karnak and the stunning cliffside mortuary temple of Deir el-Bahri, they found a baffling and violent mystery carved in stone. All across these magnificent structures, the image of a particular pharaoh had been systematically and brutally attacked. Royal names, encircled in their sacred cartouches, were violently chiseled out, leaving ghost-like abrasions on the walls. Towering statues of this king were smashed into thousands of fragments and buried in a pit, a deliberate act of ritual destruction. Reliefs depicting the pharaoh making offerings to the gods were painstakingly scraped away, leaving a conspicuous, empty space where a king should have been. This was not the random work of thieves or the decay of time. It was a targeted assassination of memory, an official campaign of erasure. So thorough it was clearly meant to wipe this ruler from the pages of history itself. The initial assumption by scholars was that this must have been a hated foreign conqueror or a heretical king who brought disaster upon Egypt. But the surrounding evidence told a different story. The art that remained untouched from this period depicted immense prosperity, architectural innovation, and a time of great peace. As Jean-Francois Champollion and others began to master the decipherment of hieroglyphs, they pieced together the stunning truth from overlooked inscriptions and surviving fragments. The erased pharaoh was no foreigner. They were a native Egyptian from the powerful and celebrated 18th dynasty. Then came the most revolutionary discovery of all, hidden in the feminine pronouns and titles that the destroyers had occasionally missed. The king they had tried so desperately to make a ghost was a woman. To understand how a woman could seize the throne of the pharaohs, one must first understand that Hatshepsut was no ordinary woman. Her bloodline was impeccable, a direct line to the divine. She was the daughter of the great warrior pharaoh Thutmose I, a conqueror who had expanded Egypt's empire. More importantly, she held the title of God's wife of Ammon, the highest-ranking religious office a woman could attain. This was not merely a ceremonial role. It gave her immense wealth, control over the powerful priesthood of the state god Amun-Ra, and a spiritual authority that was second only to the pharaoh himself. She was married, as was tradition, to her own half-brother, Thutmose II. When he ascended to the throne, Hatshepsut stood beside him as his great royal wife, the most powerful woman in Egypt. Their reign, however, was short. Thutmose II died after only a few years, leaving behind a single male heir, an infant, also named Thutmose, born to a lesser wife in the harem. By all rites and traditions, this child, Thutmose III, was now the rightful king. Hatshepsut, as the dowager queen and the young boy's aunt and stepmother, seamlessly stepped into the accepted and conventional role of queen regent. For the first few years of the boy's reign, she ruled in his name, governing the country as its effective leader while he was still a child. This was her duty, and she performed it brilliantly. But for a woman of Hatshepsut's immense ambition and intelligence, ruling from the shadows was not enough. After approximately 7 years as regent, she made an audacious and utterly unprecedented move. She did not depose her stepson. Instead, she elevated herself to rule alongside him, not as a queen, but as a senior king. She adopted the full five-fold titulary of a pharaoh, effectively becoming King Hatshepsut. This was a radical violation of ***, the ancient Egyptian concept of divine order and cosmic balance, which dictated that the throne belonged to a male ruler. To legitimize this stunning seizure of power, Hatshepsut launched one of the most brilliant propaganda campaigns in ancient history. She commissioned reliefs on the walls of her magnificent temple at Deir el-Bahri that told a new story of her origins. In these images, she claimed that the state god Amun-Ra himself had visited her mother in the guise of her father, Thutmose I, and that she was the god's divinely conceived child, predestined to rule. Having established her divine right, she then adopted the visual language of power. In statues and reliefs, she began to be depicted with all the traditional iconography of a male king. She wore the shended kilt, displayed a bare, muscular torso, and donned the iconic false beard, a symbol of pharaonic authority. This was not an attempt to hide her gender, but a shrewd political calculation. The visual language of kingship was exclusively male. There was no template for a female king. So, to be recognized as a legitimate ruler, she had to portray herself within that established visual tradition through masterful storytelling and symbolic transformation. Hatshepsut convinced her people that she was not a woman acting like a king, but a king who also happened to be a woman ordained by the gods themselves. Having secured the throne, Hatshepsut ushered in one of the most prosperous periods in the history of the New Kingdom. Her nearly 22-year reign was a radical departure from the traditions of her predecessors. While the warrior pharaohs of the 18th dynasty built their legacies on foreign conquest and military might, Hatshepsut chose a different path. She became an architect of peace and a master of commerce, understanding that true power was not just won with the sword, but also built with stone and secured through wealth. She turned Egypt's focus inward, launching a building program so vast and ambitious that it would rival that of any pharaoh before her. All across the land, from the Delta to Nubia, she ordered the restoration of temples that had fallen into disrepair. But her true genius would be displayed in her own monumental works. At Karnak, the most sacred religious site in all of Egypt, she erected a pair of magnificent red granite obelisks. Standing nearly 100 feet tall and weighing over 300 tons each, they were quarried, transported, and erected in a breathtaking feat of engineering, a testament to her power and her devotion to the god Amun-Ra. But her crowning achievement, her statement in stone, was her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. Carved directly into the face of a dramatic cliff, the temple rose in 3 stunning, colonnaded terraces, a marvel of harmony and grandeur that was unlike anything Egypt had ever seen. Its walls were covered in exquisitely carved reliefs that served as her biography, detailing her divine birth and, most famously, the crowning achievement of her reign, her legendary expedition to the distant land of Punt. For centuries, Punt was a semi-mythical place to the Egyptians, a land of the gods somewhere to the south, rich with exotic treasures. Hatshepsut, seeking to legitimize her rule with a spectacular feat, organized a massive trade mission, In the 9th year of her reign, a fleet of 5 great ships sailed down the Red Sea. The reliefs at Deir el-Bahri depict the entire journey in vivid detail. The Egyptians arriving and being greeted by the people of Punt, their cone-shaped houses built on stilts. We see them trading Egyptian goods for the treasures of Punt: ivory, ebony, gold, exotic animals like cheetahs and baboons, and, most importantly, fragrant incense and myrrh. Her mission was so successful that they were able to bring back live myrrh trees, which were then planted in the gardens of her temple, a horticultural and propaganda triumph. The expedition returned with holes so full of treasure that, as the inscriptions boast, the likes of which had not been seen for any king since the beginning, by every available metric piece, architecture, and commerce, the reign of the female king Hatshepsut was a resounding success. A golden age for her people. This only deepens the central mystery. Why would anyone want to erase it? After more than 2 decades of peace and prosperity, the reign of King Hatshepsut came to a quiet and unremarkable end. There is no evidence of a violent overthrow, no record of a struggle for power. In the 22nd year of her rule, she simply vanishes from the historical record. Modern analysis of her mummy, which was identified in 2007, suggests a woman in her 50s who was obese, suffered from diabetes, and likely died from metastatic bone cancer. The great female pharaoh was not murdered by her enemies. She was claimed by disease. With her death, the co-regency ended, and her stepson, Thutmose III, who had been waiting in the wings for over 20 years, finally took his place as the sole pharaoh of all Egypt. The transition of power marked a seismic shift in Egyptian policy. Thutmose III was everything. Hatshepsut was not. While she was a builder of temples, he was a conqueror of nations. He immediately re-established the warrior king tradition of their dynasty and embarked on a series of brilliant and relentless military campaigns. For the next 30 years, he would lead his armies across the Near East, crushing rebellions, conquering new territories, and expanding the Egyptian empire to its absolute zenith, from Nubia in the south to the banks of the Euphrates River in the north. His military genius was so profound that modern historians refer to him as the Napoleon of Egypt. He was the archetypal pharaoh, a strong, masculine, martial leader who projected an image of indomitable power. For years, he seemed to tolerate the legacy of his stepmother. Her monuments remained untouched. Her name was still spoken. But then, in a move that continues to baffle historians, something changed. Nearly 20 years after Hatshepsut's death, late in his own long reign, Thutmose III gave a chilling order. He dispatched teams of stonemasons throughout Egypt with a single, brutal task: to erase the memory of the female king. They went to her temples, her obelisks, her statues, and systematically hacked away her image and her royal cartouche. On her monuments at Chronicle, they chiseled out her figure and replaced it with images of her father, her husband, or even Thutmose III himself. They smashed her statues into thousands of pieces and dumped them in a quarry near her temple. This was not a spontaneous act of rage. It was a cold, calculated, and thorough campaign of posthumous persecution. The question is not just who did it, but why now? If Thutmose III truly harbored a deep-seated hatred for the woman who held his throne, why wait to decades? What changed late in his reign that made the memory of a long-dead, successful female king suddenly so dangerous that it had to be annihilated from the face of the earth? The question of why Thutmose III waited 20 years to begin his campaign of destruction is the key to solving the mystery of the Ghost Queen. If it were a simple act of passionate revenge against the stepmother who usurped his throne, he surely would have acted immediately upon her death. The 2-decade delay points to a motive that was not personal, but political. A cold calculation made late in his own life. The most widely accepted theory today is that Thutmose III was not erasing a person he hated, but an idea he feared. As he neared the end of his own long and successful reign, his thoughts would have turned to his legacy and the succession of his own son. The very existence of Hatshepsut's prosperous rule created a dangerous precedent. It proved that a determined, powerful royal woman could successfully claim the throne, potentially inspiring future queens to challenge the traditional male line of inheritance. To preserve the patriarchal order, or ***, and ensure his own dynasty's stability, the memory of the female king had to be excised from the record. It was a ruthless act of political pragmatism, designed to close a door in history that Hatshepsut had audaciously kicked open. He unleashed the full power of the state in this mission. For years, his workers swarmed across Egypt, fulfilling their chilling task. But in their attempt to erase her, they inadvertently preserved her. In their haste to destroy her statues, they smashed them into thousands of pieces and dumped them into a quarry near her temple. These fragments, buried under the sand, were protected from the elements for over 3 millennia. It was here in the early 20th century that archaeologists from New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art found the Hatshepsut hole and began the painstaking decades-long process of piecing together the queen's shattered image like the world's most significant jigsaw puzzle. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in 2007. Using CT scans and matching a single molar found in a wooden box to an empty socket in an unidentified mummy, Dr. Zahi Hawass and his team were able to formally identify the body of Hatshepsut herself. After thousands of years as a ghost, the queen finally had her face back. The attempt to condemn her to oblivion was, in the end, a spectacular failure. Her enemies tried to hack her from the walls of history, but they only deepened her mystery and guaranteed her immortality. The empty spaces they carved became a breadcrumb trail for historians, and the smashed statues they buried became the very evidence used to resurrect her. The story of Hatshepsut is a powerful testament to a woman who defied every tradition, to rule as a king in her own right, and an enduring lesson in the futility of trying to erase the past. You can smash stone, you can chisel away names, but you cannot kill the truth, for it will always lie waiting in the sand to be rediscovered.